Manchester United was the club.
It's red in Russia. It's Manchester United's night. Best in the Premier League. They're best in the Champions League.
The club that terrorised every team in England. They were the club that didn't just win, but built greatness.
Manchester United are the champions of Europe again, and nobody will ever win a European Cup final more dramatically than this.
A club where talent didn't just grow, it transformed.
And Beckham saw Sullivan off his line. Oh, that is absolutely phenomenal.
Young players became icons. Legends weren't just born here, they were built here at Manchester United. And of course, it wasn't just about winning matches. It was more about building dynasties, setting standards, leading the footballing world with pride, power, and purpose. But now, that legacy feels like a distant echo. Because today, Manchester United doesn't make legends, they destroy them. Players don't rise here anymore like they used to. Instead, they fall. They arrive full of promise, full of dreams, and they leave broken, confused, and full of doubts. Players who won the World Cup, young players with big potential, expensive signings, top talents from the academy. It doesn't matter who you are or how good you could be. Manchester United always finds a way to destroy you. One by one, the club chews them up and spits them out. Not because they're not good enough, but because the system is so broken. And this isn't just a few bad signings. It's not just a short period of poor performance. It goes deeper than that. It's a pattern that keeps going. A system that takes hope and turns it into regret. And to understand how we got here, we need to cover so many things. Because it's not only about the players they bought or the managers they hired. It's about a club that lost its identity. A club still living in its past while ignoring the rot underneath. From boardroom chaos to toxic dressing rooms to a lack of football vision, Manchester United has become the perfect storm for failure. The pressure is huge, the direction of the club is confusing, and the support for players, it's barely there. For young footballers, joining Manchester United isn't a dream anymore. It's a risk, a red flag, a place where even the most talented can disappear and be forgotten. This is the story of how one of the most iconic clubs in football history went from making legends to destroying them. It all started with Malcolm Glazer, another American billionaire with no knowledge of football. By 2005, he'd pulled off one of the most controversial and hostile takeovers in sports history, and that is buying Manchester United using a method that would forever change the club. Forever. The crazy part is that they didn't pay for Manchester United with their own money. Instead, they borrowed hundreds of millions of pounds and secured the loans against the club itself. This meant that from the moment they took control, United, once a financially strong and self-sustaining club, was suddenly drowning in debt. And this wasn't just any debt. It was the kind that came with high interest payments, money that now had to come out of the club's own profits. This was the moment when Manchester United wasn't just a football club anymore. It was seen more as a business tool, a cash machine used to pay off the loans that bought it. And all this mess that the Glazers were causing left Man United fans mad. There were even protests, marches, and fans started wearing green and gold, the club's original colours, to demand change. But the Glazers didn't listen. In fact, they made things worse. They kept taking more money out of the club through dividends, fees, and interest payments. Over time, they took hundreds of millions of pounds, money that could have been spent on fixing the Old Trafford, improving the academy, or building for the future. But somehow, they kept winning. All thanks to Sir Alex Ferguson, Manchester United stayed successful, at least for a while. The hardest part for him was that he was working under financial pressure, which meant he couldn't go after the biggest players. He couldn't plan for the next 5 years. He just had to win with whatever resources he was given. And if he wanted to buy someone, he often had to sell first. By the time Sir Alex Ferguson retired in 2013, everything changed. And for the first time in years, the truth could no longer be hidden. The trophies stopped, the structure collapsed, and the mask finally came off. The Glazers were finally exposed. Manchester United was no longer being run like a football club. It was being run like a business, focusing on money and not trophies. And at the center of that change was someone who knew nothing about football. It was Ed Woodward, a former investment banker who ended up running the football side of Manchester United. He knew how to close massive sponsorship deals, but he had no idea how to rebuild a broken squad. And that's when the chaos began. United started spending like crazy. Massive transfer fees, record-breaking wages. They had no idea what they were doing, and the results were disastrous. There was no proper scouting department, no modern football infrastructure. The damage didn't just affect results, it affected the players. Because without structure, without support, Manchester United became a graveyard for talent. And one of the first victims was Ángel Di María. He joined Manchester United in 2014 as one of the best wingers in the world. He'd just won the Champions League with Real Madrid and was expected to bring United back to the top. But from the moment he arrived, everything went wrong. Louis van Gaal, who was the manager at the time, didn't know how to use him. Di María was a dynamic, free-flowing attacker, but Van Gaal forced him into rigid roles that didn't suit his style. On the pitch, he looked lost, and off the pitch, things got even worse. His house was broken into while his family was inside. He no longer felt safe in Manchester. Di María even said to himself, Van Gaal was the worst manager he'd ever had.
El peor de Van Gaal, eso te lo aseguro, sin ninguna duda, ya te la tiro antes.
In fact, he admitted he never even wanted to join Manchester United in the first place. After just one season, he left for PSG. Di Maria's story was supposed to be a turning point, but Manchester United didn't learn from it, because just a year later, they did it again. Memphis Depay arrived at Old Trafford in 2015 as one of Europe's brightest stars. Confident, creative, and coming off a 22-goal season with PSV. But at United, things quickly fell apart. He was thrown into a struggling team with no clear direction, under a manager who didn't know how to develop or protect young players. Instead of being given time to grow, Memphis was heavily criticized for his lifestyle, fashion choices, and confidence, even when he barely had chances to prove himself on the pitch. The pressure, the media attention, and the lack of support crushed his confidence. By the time he left the club just 18 months later, he wasn't seen as a star anymore. He was seen as a flop. Manchester United didn't nurture his potential. Instead, they rushed him, judged him, and let him fail. He even quoted in his book, "I lost myself in Manchester. That was the real heart of the matter. It took me a few years to realize that. During my time in Manchester, I blamed everybody, Van Gaal, Mourinho. I felt like the whole world was against me. But I didn't blame myself. That's not how it works in life." But once again, Manchester United didn't listen, because Memphis wasn't the last. In fact, he was just one name on a growing list. Alexis Sanchez arrived as one of the Premier League's biggest names. At Arsenal, he was unstoppable. But at United, he looked like a shadow of himself, overwhelmed by the system, suffocated by expectations, and isolated from the team. He later admitted he wanted to tear up his contract after just one training session. Jadon Sancho was one of the most exciting young players in Europe when he joined Manchester United in 2021. But instead of helping him grow, the club made things worse. He was put into a team with no clear plan, constant changes, and way too much pressure. He struggled to fit in, lost confidence, and was often left out of game. Then things hit rock bottom. Erik ten Hag called him out in public, questioning his effort in training.
Jadon, on his performance on the training, we didn't select him. Now, you have to reach a level every day on Manchester United, and we can make choices in the front line. And so for this game he wasn't selected.
Sancho fired back, and the club suspended him. He didn't play another game for months. And this is the pattern. Because at Manchester United, the pressure doesn't help you rise, it crushes you. When you're on the pitch, every touch is watched, and if you make a simple tiny mistake, it instantly goes viral because the media never sleeps when it comes to Manchester United. Players don't get enough time to grow here. They're thrown into a pitch where they all feel the pressure and are expected to perform instantly. If they struggle, the criticism is brutal because Harry Maguire's been through it. He was once England's best defender till he wore a Manchester United jersey. He became a meme.
To be off balance, but restored it pretty quickly. Here's Son.
Oh, yes!
The same pattern followed with Antony. They paid £86 million for one of the most hyped young wingers at the time, but week after week, he failed to deliver. No goals and no progress. Just another big money flop in a club where talent goes to disappear. They criticised him for being too predictable, not being able to score goals or give assists, and not living up to his price tag. I mean, who does a 360 spin that fooled no one and failed to miss a pass to his teammate after that? And Paul Pogba was blamed every time the team struggled, even though it wasn't his fault. He was criticised more for his haircuts and lifestyle than his football. Romelu Lukaku, Donny van de Beek, Fred, all talented and expensive, and all wasted in a system that didn't know how to use them. Each of them came in with big hopes, but they were dropped into a broken system. Some were overhyped, some were mismanaged. But all of them were left to sink or swim in a toxic environment. Because at Manchester United, the pressure doesn't build slowly. It hits the moment you walk through the door. If the players were suffering, so were the managers. Because at Manchester United, failure doesn't just happen, it repeats itself. Every manager since Sir Alex Ferguson came in with a mission. David Moyes was supposed to carry the legacy. Louis van Gaal was supposed to bring structure. Jose Mourinho was supposed to bring trophies. Ola was supposed to bring back the United DNA. Erik ten Hag, he was sold as the tactical genius to finally restore order. Each arrived with a vision, a plan, a promise to bring Manchester United back to the top. But none of them were given the structure to succeed. They were handed broken squads, poor recruitment, and a club with no football identity. Instead of support, they got interference. Instead of patience, they got pressure. Some clashed with the players. Some were let down by the board. Some simply weren't good enough. But all of them became victims of the same cycle. A toxic loop of unrealistic expectations, no long-term planning, and a club too obsessed with image to focus on the actual football. And at the heart of this endless cycle lies the reality no one wants to admit. The people calling the shots aren't football people at all. Today, the Glazer family still owns Manchester United, and nearly 20 years after their takeover, they've done exactly what many feared from the very beginning. They've taken one of the most iconic clubs in football history and turned it into a corporate asset. Because for the Glazers, Manchester United has never been about football. It's been about money. And in that regard, they've won. Over the last 2 decades, the Glazers have extracted over £1.1 billion from the club through dividends, debt interest payments, consulting fees, and a web of financial tools designed to funnel money out rather than invested in the team. While the fans cared about what was happening on the field, the Glazers only cared about making money. And when Malcolm Glazer passed away in 2014, the club wasn't taken over by someone who loved football. Instead, it went to his 6 kids. None of them really knew much about football. They kept control because the money kept flowing. And this is what makes it so frustrating. Because even when the football was falling apart, even when managers were being sacked, even when fans were protesting in the streets, the Glazers stayed silent. By 2022, things had reached a breaking point. The protests grew louder, and fans across the world came together with one clear demand, and that was to sell the club. And for the first time, it looked like the Glazers were actually feeling the pressure. They said they were exploring strategic alternatives, a fancy way of saying they might sell the club.
We announced yesterday the board went through a process and it's decided it's going to look at different strategic alternatives, and that's what we're doing.
Fans were excited. Maybe this was it, the moment everything would finally change. Billionaires started lining up. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Sheikh Jassim, offer after offer, round after round. And then months went by and nothing happened. But in the end, the truth was simple. The Glazers didn't want to let go. They wanted all the money, but not the power. So in 2024, they struck a deal with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He bought 25% of the club, and more importantly, took control of football operations. It wasn't a full sale, but it was a shift. For the first time in years, someone else was finally calling the shots on the football side. When he took over football operations, he brought in people like Omar Barada from Manchester City. But here's the thing. The Glazers still own 75% of the club, which makes them still hold all the power. And that's what hurts most for the fans, because all they want is the Glazers to be gone, and for Manchester United to be how it used to be in the Sir Alex Ferguson era. But the truth is, as long as the Glazers are in control, nothing will change. This is what happens when a legendary football club is run by people who don't care about football. And until that ends, the story of Manchester United will remain the same. Not a club that makes legends, but a club that destroys their own players.